Yeah.
This is Geek Therapy Radio.
What are we waiting for?
And now your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. Take freaking 2. I'm a little frustrated. See, if you listen to this past midweek Geek, where I talked about the new Apple products they just announced, well, as of recording this week in New York, the Mac Mini, the new iPod Pros, and the new MacBook Air. If you listen to that midweek Geek, you heard a hiss underneath everything, like an old dirty cassette tape with a dirty playback head. Let me explain that for a second. And this is why I'm frustrated. This is why this is take 2 of Geek Therapy Radio, because the first take of Geek Therapy Radio, I recorded maybe 30 minutes of a 39-minute total content show, and that hiss was there. So that hiss was somebody had changed, for whatever reason, here in the studio that I record in, had changed the recording resolution to 8-bit. 8-bit, 22,000 hertz. Well, not 22,000 hertz. 22,000 kilohertz. So 8-bit. That's very low resolution for audio. Of course, it's intelligible. It's still intelligible, but it's about half the resolution as full CD quality, the full standard, which is 16-bit, 44.1 kilohertz. I was recording the Midweek Geek and 30 minutes of this show until I decided to redo it, until I noticed I was recording all that at 8-bit, half resolution, and I'm very frustrated by that. That is just me letting you behind the curtains here at Geek Therapy Radio, as I am one to do, because I think it's fun for my listeners to kind of know what's going on back here. I want you to feel like when you're listening to this, that not just that you're listening, that you're consuming the content, but that you are effectively part of the creative process. I want you to participate in the show. That's why I'm so adamant about saying you can find Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You've heard me say that ad nauseum. That's because this is interactive, and by me letting you behind the curtain, behind the veil a little bit, this is not pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, Wizard of Oz stuff. Yes, pay attention to what's going on back here, because I think it's fascinating. I record each of these shows usually in the KTRH studios. This show, as it's airing, of course, airs on KPRC 950 AM, but I pre-record the show in the KTRH studio, 740 AM. So I like to kind of let you know what's going on, even if it's frustrating to me. This show is brought to you in full 16-bit 44 kilohertz audio, 44,000.1 kilohertz audio, full CD resolution. Now, I know if you're listening to the broadcast, it's on AM radio, and some of the bandwidth is chopped. The audio bandwidth is chopped to fit the amplitude modulation of AM radio. But if you listen to the podcast, you're listening to it 16-bit, 44.1K. The side note also, when I upload the podcasts, the Midweek Geek and the full episode of Geek Therapy Radio, like you're listening to now, I upload it as an MP3, yes, at 320 kilobits per second. That's the highest quality MP3 possible. I don't need to do that. I do that so I upload something that's the highest possible quality MP3, so that by the time, no matter what platform you're listening to it on, Spreaker, the iHeartRadio app, iTunes. When I say iTunes, really it is iTunes, but it's that podcast app on your Apple device, on your iPhone or your iPad, that purple podcast icon. That's where you can find Geek Therapy Radio as well. Make sure it's Geek Therapy Radio with Johnny Hamburger. Anyways, when I upload the podcast each week into Spreaker, I upload it at the highest possible quality MP3 to make up for the fact that by the time it gets streamed out to other platforms, you're already working with the highest resolution MP3 possible. That's why when you choose to download the show, yes, it is a little bit more capacity. It's a little bit more, it takes up a little more storage than your average show, but I think that people appreciate it. You know, our phones have so much memory, our computers have so much memory that I don't think that by and large many people mind that downloading Geek Therapy Radio results in a little bit of a larger file because I keep as much fidelity as possible there. I think, and I've mentioned this before, that I go back and listen to these shows pretty often because I listen to it like a random listener. What would I want to hear? And how would I like to hear it? So I take a lot of pride in the fidelity and the audio of this show. So when you download the podcast, I want it to stand out from other podcasts you listen to by squeezing out every little drop of fidelity I possibly can. I do that as a service to the listener because that's, again, I listen to my shows as a random listener. It's what I would appreciate. You ever listen to a podcast that's recorded crappily? That's a real word, crappily. Here so saith me right now. Ever listen to a podcast that's otherwise good, but it's recorded crappy? That's because not everybody getting into podcasting is a recording engineer. Not tooting my own horn, that is what I went to school for in addition to radio, television, and film, but I have a basic foundation of how to build audio to sound the best. So when you listen to each podcast, it is nice and uniform in in the speech, at least. I keep some dynamics there. Yes, if you load it into an audio editor, you would see that it goes up to negative 0.1, but I keep it loud, but I like to keep it dynamic too. So everything's relatively, you don't have to adjust the volumes every time. Some podcasts you listen to, you got to keep adjusting the volumes and blah, blah, blah. There'll be more on that in the next segment. 30 seconds here for Audi Central Houston. I love Audi Central Houston. I love going there and just looking at the cars, and they have a whole new lineup now. The new A6, the new A8, and the all-new Q8, and that Audi e-tron I've told you guys about. It's all there at Audi Central Houston, and you can start looking at an Audi in every budget at AudiCentralHouston.com. It's super convenient on your tablet. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I am Johnny Hemberger. Just to kind of wrap up my thoughts about quality of podcasts. Podcasts that you listen to, podcasts that you enjoy, but you might enjoy more if the audio game was top-notch. A lot of podcasts you listen to, they don't have top-notch audio quality, and I am not in any way, shape, or form trying to tear down those podcasters or the content. A lot of them have really, really great content. It's just a shame that the audio is so bad. And to bring you up to speed, if you're just joining me on Geek Therapy Radio, I spent the first segment, I told listeners that Midweek Geek was tainted this week by a hiss due to low resolution recording that I didn't know until after the fact. Someone had changed the settings where I recorded, and I recorded it in 8-bit for whatever reason. Why? Why would anyone set it to 8-bit? Who knows? So the quality of Midweek Geek suffered, and I had recorded almost all of this episode of Geek Therapy Radio this week that you're listening to right now. I recorded almost all of it. I recorded 30 minutes out of 39 minutes of total content before I realized, oh, it's only an 8-bit still. So I had to go back and change it to 16-bit, 44.1, as God intended, and redo this entire show. And that got me on the subject of poor audio quality in podcasts. So it's just a shame that some podcasts you listen to suffer from bad quality. If you are a podcaster, and almost everybody is now, and you want some advice on how to record better podcasts, reach out to me. Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I will probably do a little kind of tutorials, at least one segment, about how to record a good quality podcast that you don't have to make excuses for when people listen. I can't help you with content. I struggle my own each week with coming up with quality content, but if you have quality content, don't let that content be tainted by poor quality audio. So I might do a segment on actual podcast audio. On recording the best podcast audio. The other night, I was going over something silly with Sarah, and it did remind me, I want to run it by you guys. This is silly here. We're getting into some silliness now here on Geek Therapy Radio. I was going over all sorts of stupid podcast ideas, and I'm going to toss some of those out there for you, listener, who may be deciding to do a podcast yourself. I'm going to toss you some freebies, some freebie titles for your podcast here, with a subject matter and therefore what you should name your podcast. Let's go over some just off the top of my head. If you're going to do a Christian religious podcast, you should call it Godcast. Let it sink in a little bit. If you're going to do a podcast that's all about cats, you should call it Podcats. See the T and the S, you just switch off at the end. Podcast. Podcats. Isn't that clever? If you're going to do a fishing podcast, give a second here for you to think of it. What should it be called? Well, actually, it's a twofer. Trick question. If you're going to do a fishing podcast, you should call it The Rodcast. Or, if you're going to do a fishing podcast about one specific fish, I guess, you should call it The Codcast. I hope those of you listening on KPRC 950 AM right now haven't already changed the channel. Oh, we're going to keep going with this, though. More silly cleverness to help all you geeks, because you're all into different things. We're all geeks about different things. You all have our different hobbies and passions. I'm going to help you. Not only did I give you some tips about upping your audio A game if you're going to record a podcast, but what you should call the podcast. Let's keep on going. If your name is Todd and you want to do a podcast of famous Todds in history, you should call it The Toddcast. The Toddcast. Oh, what else should there be? What other... Ooh. If you're going to do a mathematics, like a math tutor podcast, or you're going to talk about bizarre things in the world, you should call it The Oddcast. How much time am I chewing up with this bull crap? I think I'm two and a half minutes into this particular segment of a segment. Godcast, Toddcast, Rodcast. Oh, okay. If you like to make alterations to anything, if you like to alter the programming of a video game, if you like to alter cars, if you like to alter anything you buy to make it better or more personal, you should call that podcast. And I'm giving a little dead air between all these to let you get to the conclusion before I do. But if you want to have a podcast like I just mentioned, call it, I almost forgot it, the Modcast. Modcast. These are all freebies I'm doing for you, the listeners. I don't owe it to you. I could have started any one of these podcasts and just, well, rake in the dough is to be seen. Maybe I can go to Audi and say, you want to be a partner of the Rodcast, where I talk about fishing? I don't know anything about fishing. I could have fishing guests on each week. I have a fish on as a guest. It'd be a boring guest. Just put a microphone right up to a fish's mouth. Oh, let me think of one more. I swear it that these are all just coming off the top of my head. And me talking right now is buying time so I can figure out what the next podcast is going to be here on the way out, because I'm really chewing in time. Let's think. Okay. Oh, perfect to end it. Perfect to end this segment. If you are going to make a podcast about how things just ain't right, that things don't line up, and things are just a little bit out of whack, you know what you'd call that podcast? The Flawed Cast. Ooh-wee, I'm smarter than even my mom thinks. My mom thinks I'm smart. My mom doesn't think I'm dumb. What do we got here? What's the time at? Wild guess who this last 60 seconds is for. Yep, Audi Central Houston in AudiCentralHouston.com. When I say there's an Audi for every budget, I mean it. Everything from used certified Audis at Audi Central Houston to the new A3. There's an Audi for every budget. Even if you've got a baller budget and you want the new R8, if you get an R8, let me know and let me take it for a spin. Because even though I'm a partner with Audi Central Houston, it's pretty tough to swing getting a ride in an R8. They don't trust it to any radio yokel. And I am the yokelist of all radio locals. So, an Audi in every budget, from the A3 to the R8. Make sure you check out the new A6s, the new A8s, and the brand new Q8, and the new Audi e-tron. Get the Audi hookup at Audi Central Houston and start your search at AudiCentralHouston.com. They'll treat you right. Sodcast. If you're going to do a podcast about landscaping, Sodcast. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I am your mental curator, for better or worse, Johnny Hemberger. Make sure, like I've mentioned, you like, follow, and subscribe to Geek Therapy Radio all over the place, and I really do mean it. I've had wonderful listeners from around the world telling me very nice things on YouTube and Facebook and email. I really appreciate that. Just this week, heard from a gentleman in New Jersey. I think his name was Scott. I might be butchering that. I need to go back and look it up. New Jersey, and a fan who I don't know his first name, but he's over there in the UK. So thank you to you both, and thank you for everybody for making Geek Therapy Radio part of your weekly routine, I guess. And I hope you really enjoyed the 2018 Geek Therapy Radio Halloween special. Oh my goodness. This is more for those of you who are just have stumbled upon the show on KPRC 950 AM. You driving around listening right now, the Uber driver. By the way, tell your Uber drivers to tune into Geek Therapy Radio midnight Saturday night. Well, technically Sunday morning. Here on KPRC 950 AM. The show officially starts at 12:06 a.m. Sunday mornings. But I like to think of it as Saturday night, because that's what it is. You're taking an Uber from here to there, listen to Geek Therapy Radio and say, I know that guy. He's kind of a dork, but I know him. He's sexy. Give him that. What other tangent can I go off about myself? But anyways, I just, for those of you listening on the broadcast right now, if you missed the 2018 Geek Therapy Radio Halloween special, that is case in point why you should subscribe, or at least go check out the Geek Therapy Radio podcast on the iHeartRadio app. It's free, costs nothing. The iHeartRadio app, or on your Apple device, just tap that purple podcast icon. Android, you can use Google Podcasts on Android. Pocket Casts is my favorite app, Pocket Space Casts. You can ask Spreaker. You could say, hey, Alexa, play the Geek Therapy Radio podcast, and Alexa will respond. Playing the latest episode of Geek Therapy Radio podcast with Johnny Hemberger, or Geek Therapy Radio with Johnny Hemberger on the iHeartRadio app, whatever she says. But I'm just saying, you can ask your smart device, hey, Google, play the Geek Therapy Radio podcast, and it'll come up. And you're going to want to do that so that you can hear the 2018 Halloween special. Just a quick recap of what it is. I describe it as improv radio in the style of a 1939 radio caper. And a big inspiration for why I did that show was Orson Welles and War of the Worlds. For those unfamiliar with that, look it up. It is genius. He broadcasts a program that was supposed to sound like an orchestra playing. We joined the orchestra, whatever, and then they kept breaking away from the music program to bring you breaking news of an event unfolding in a field somewhere. I think it was in New York. Oh, don't quote me on it. It's been forever since I listened to it. Basically, they kept cutting away from the orchestra to bring you breaking news of what amounts to an alien invasion. And a lot of people who didn't tune into the first part of the radio broadcast were fooled and bamboozled and thought that the Earth was actually being invaded by aliens. So people were just shooting their guns into the sky. A few water towers got shot and all full of holes because people thought they were flying saucers. So I did the 2018 Geek Therapy Radio Halloween special in that sort of vein, where I start out, I won't give it all away, but I start out the show in the style, and it sounds like 1939 radio. It's really cool. We spent so much time on it. That's an understatement. Me and my friends for this spent so much time putting this together. But the show starts out where I just have gotten back from the 1939 World's Fair, I believe in Chicago. And I'm talking about the newfangled televisions that beam pictures right through the air. It's sorcery, I tell you, sorcery. President Roosevelt, right there in the room, but he's not in the room. Pictures right through the air. Something like that. And then we break away to follow well, you'll just have to listen. Make sure you subscribe to Geek Therapy Radio on the iHeartRadio app. It's a free podcast, 100% free. On that note, on the free note, I know a lot of podcasts have a Patreon. And for those of you who don't know, Patreon is basically where you can go donate money or support the creator, support the artist, support the podcaster, support the YouTuber, whatever. You can give as little as $1 a month up to whatever they set it at. 200, I don't know what it is, but I know it's at least $1 a month, which directly supports the podcaster or the content creator. I don't have one of those. I don't want one of those. especially right now. And I will explain why. This is because you are my listeners and you're my family. I will explain why I don't have a Patreon and don't see myself having a Patreon anytime soon. There may come a moment in time where I do get a Patreon, which I'll explain in a second. But as of right now, while I am on broadcast radio, I will not ever have a Patreon. Because I don't think, and this is just me, just personally, I don't know if other radio hosts do this, but I'm not sure, it might be illegal. I have no idea. Even if it's fully legal, I wouldn't do it. I don't feel like it's right or ethical for me to ask you to contribute to my show on Patreon while I have partners, sponsors for the radio show, like Audi Central Houston and Kung Fu Saloon. I don't want you to pay me. I don't want to be paid twice. It's unethical to ask you, the listener, to pay me when I'm going about making money in traditional ways with sponsors. I'm not going to take money from Audi or Kung Fu Saloon and then ask to take money from you, the listener. I won't do that. Could I do it? Probably. But I just don't think it's right. Now, on that note, I will say that when the day, well, I don't know. If it ever happens that Geek Therapy Radio is taken off the air, if I no longer have a show on broadcast radio, at that point, if it's podcast only, digital distribution only, at that point, I may start a Patreon. And I would start that Patreon, or I would start, asking my audience to support the show if they like the show. $1 a month, $2 a month, $5, $10, whatever you wanted to do, I would at that point. Because if I didn't have a broadcast terrestrial radio show, and again, this is full behind the curtains, full behind the scenes, full disclosure, because you are part of my radio family. You listeners are part of my family, the Geek Therapy Radio family. If I lost the broadcast, that would mean that I have to go renegotiate with my partners, because a big part of our agreement of how I'm paid by sponsors like Audi Central Houston or Kung Fu Saloon is that they have the reach of broadcast radio. So once I have to renegotiate that and take a lot less, let's just say, from a traditional means, then yes, I might open the Patreon at that point. So while I have a traditional broadcast radio show, I will never ask the listeners for money. All I want you to do is check out the sponsors, because they really do make it possible. And I do talk to these people face to face. I know the GM at Audi Central Houston and Kung Fu Saloon. I know they're good people, and I wouldn't take a sponsor that I don't believe in. And that's speak of the devil, and he shall appear. 30 seconds on the way out for Audi Central Houston. Audi's not the devil, even though their cars are devilishly sexy. Audi Central Houston and AudiCentralHouston.com. Danny Posey, he's the GM over there. Like I just said, I talk to the folks that partner with my show. Danny Posey will take great care of you. Make sure you tell them that you heard about Audi Central Houston on Geek Therapy Radio. And before you go to Audi Central Houston in person, check out AudiCentralHouston.com. Do it for me, listeners. It would mean a lot. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I am Johnny Hemberger, your mental curator. It really means a lot to me that you have stuck through this episode of Geek Therapy Radio. I'm getting a lot of... I'm letting you behind the curtain a lot here. It's like I'm reconnecting with the audience. Because I really do believe in full disclosure about what I'm doing here and how I'm making my money at Geek Therapy Radio. I'm not balling at all. It's not baller status money. I have not lost touch. I am not 1%. I am still very, very much 99%. But I do appreciate my partners regardless. I'm not in it to deceive my listeners. I'm not going to take sponsors from vape shops, for instance. I don't believe in it. I don't believe in taking a sponsor for something, for an activity from which the jury is still out from the health implications. All I'm saying is, thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio this far into this episode, because I'm getting a lot of things off my chest. And this segment is going to be actually on geek topics, even though I do think letting you know what's going on at Geek Therapy Radio is therapeutic to me. That's in the title, Geek Therapy Radio, which is much therapy for me as it is for you to come geek out with me for 39 minutes each week. If you're just listening to the broadcast, it's 39 minutes of content, and the rest of the broadcast, of course, is commercials, fill in those gaps. If you're listening to the podcast, it's an exact 39 minutes with minimal sponsor interruption. But I appreciate you spending the time with me, because I know that you don't have to listen to me. You do not have to subscribe to this podcast. What am I doing here? You know what? The reason why you're listening, and especially the reason why you're subscribing, is because you feel some sort of connection with this show that you don't get elsewhere, or that maybe you do get elsewhere. If you do get the same sort of connection with Geek Therapy Radio that you get organically from some other podcast, some other radio show, that is 100% great. I don't want you to tune in here. I don't want listeners to tune in and be like, he's doing the same old crap everyone else is doing. I have nothing against politics. I have nothing against social commentary, but it's been done. And as a matter of fact, I know some of you might be perceptive and thinking right now, well, there's a lot of geek stuff too on the radio. No, there's not a lot of geek stuff on the radio. Absolutely not. I'm a unicorn. The fact that geek stuff is on broadcast terrestrial radio is an absolute miracle. In the fact that geek show on terrestrial radio, Geek Therapy Radio, is on in a size 6 market is a miracle within a miracle. Size 6 market, again, letting you guys behind the scenes, means that our signal covers 6 million people. That's what the size of the market means. So our signal here, KPRC 950 AM, technically covers 6 million people. Does that mean 6 million people per day are listening to KPRC 950 AM at any given time, especially right now whenever you're listening to it? I'm going to guesstimate it's probably 1240-ish. It's either 1240, 1250-ish right now AM that you're listening to this on broadcast radio. No. 6 million people are not hearing my voice right now at any given second, but the show is still on a size 6 market, and it's a geek show. It's a therapeutic geek show on broadcast radio, in addition to being a podcast. The fact that it's on broadcast radio, a show of my type, on such a huge market, is a blessing miracle. But back to a few seconds ago when I said the more perceptive of you will have noticed this. A geek podcast is a dime a dozen. There are probably, and this is even a conservative estimate, there's probably thousands of geek-related podcasts for you to choose from. So I appreciate from the bottom of my heart that you at least have this one in your rotation. That Geek Therapy Radio is in your rotation of nerd-type podcasts. But what I'm trying to offer you that's different than the rest, one that I covered earlier in this podcast, is audio quality. Two, most importantly, I'm trying to offer you a connection so that even people who don't identify as geeks can feel some sort of home here. Because let's face it, me talking about video games or me talking about RC airplanes or me talking about instrument, as far as something tangible that you hold in your hand, just physical things, those don't matter. You cannot take that to the grave with you. At best, those are just instruments that you can use, tools that you can use to bring joy to others. In any community, let's use the RC, radio-controlled aircraft or cars or whatever community. Let's use the RC hobbyist community, for example. The actual physical car, the nuts and bolts and batteries and wires and whatever you're into with modifying and tinkering with an RC vehicle, aircraft, boat, what have you, that's just your first kind of foot in the door into that community. Do you stay in that community because of the RC vehicle or because of the people you meet and the connections you make in that community? That's what I'm trying to do here at Geek Therapy Radio. The therapy part of it is huge to me. I want people who don't think they have a hobby or who don't yet have a hobby to come in, find a hobby, find a geek interest, find something to geek out about if they don't already have something to geek out about, because we're all geeks about something, whether we know what that something is or not yet. But I want them to come here and find a community. That's what Geek Therapy Radio is all about. And that's why I love the fact that you choose to make Geek Therapy Radio a part of your weekly routine. Because again, you don't have to. Should I talk about a geek topic this week? You know, there's not really much that went on. I covered Apple's keynote earlier in Midweek Geek, hiss and all. I covered it. So I don't think I'm going to do that this week. I think I'm just going to finish out here, not with an ad, that'll come later, but by asking you to get involved. Really, to reach out to me, either geektherapy@iheartmedia.com, that's an email, geektherapy@iheartmedia.com, or Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. To reach out. I am listening and I will see it. I promise you. Get involved with me here at Geek Therapy Radio because we are a community and we are here to love and support each other. Now it's time for the sponsors. WorthTheWait.co. WEIGHT. WorthTheWait.co. My geeks, sometimes we have a problem with eating. I know my belly is a little, I'm not 18 years old anymore. Go check out WorthTheWait, WEIGHT.co, and get some help with your nutrition. That doesn't suck. WorthTheWait.co. Make sure you also go check out Kung Fu Saloon at 5317 Washington Avenue. Beer, arcade games, food, and karaoke. Kung Fu Saloon, 5317 Washington Avenue. And of course, Audi Central Houston and AudiCentralHouston.com. An Audi in every budget. Tell the GM, Danny Posey, that Geek Therapy Radio sent you, and they'll take really good care of you at Audi Central Houston and AudiCentralHouston.com. And please check out my good friends at 8millionstories.org. They help keep previously incarcerated youth on a path to success. That's 8millionstories.org.